So it's not very often we get a guest that has over 40 years of experience inside of healthcare, managing physicians and teams all the way from small town Alaska, rural towns, less than 4,000 people, all the way to Kaiser Permanente, which, according to last year, they revenued over $127 billion. This episode is for people that are overseeing operations, dealing with leaders, and also people that have aspirations to grow in their respective organizations. Check this out.
All right, Wayne, welcome to the show. Glad you were able to make it out. So let's just dive right in. I think the biggest thing that I really want to start off with is that you have basically a 40-year history in healthcare management. Obviously, you've been in some extremely large institutions, Kaiser Permanente. I'm really curious to know, what are some of the bigger changes that you've seen from when you got into it to the point where you're at now, which is you retired a few months ago. Congratulations, by the way.
Yeah,
right?
Congrats.
Hell yeah. It's that point everybody's hoping for. But what are some of the biggest changes? Maybe we'll start with some of the good stuff first, and then we can kind of get into maybe some of the things that you're not so thrilled about.
When I first started, I was a respiratory therapist, and I remember in school, we was trained at UCLA Hospital, and we still had iron lungs, and we had to do a little bit of an orientation about iron lungs, which is, harkens back to the 50s. All our ventilators were analog and very mechanical. And, I was just at the beginning of the first kind of modern computer ventilators, the Puritan Bennett 7200, that kind of stuff. And these things would seem like antiquated, crazy things that weighed about 600 pounds. And now the little computers are a little smaller. Ventilators are like, you don't have to be a big man to do that. Respiratory was predominantly a male field. And I see that, it's predominantly a female field now. So that's a big change. I think going from paper charting to electronic charting was probably one of the hugest things, that really kind of got our industry into the modern world, everything like that. So that's an amazing thing. You just see all this technology now that you take for granted. People buy a watch that has a pulse oximeter, but we had pulse oximeters, and those were big things that we wheeled around on carts and
what does that do to kind of the mentality of the workforce? Because you can see this kind of really in any industry, like getting into pick your industry and then doing that in the 70s, whether you're working like in a car factory versus today where things are far more mechanical, they're computerized, there's robotics in there, where it's almost, it's significantly easier. Therefore, people change around that too. Did you see kind of a mentality change as well? So you mentioned that was predominantly male. Now it's predominantly female.
Yeah.
Right. Because there's like heavy lifting involved. Do you see some of those changes kind of in different areas in healthcare too?
I do. It's not just respiratory that had a change. There's a lot of women doctors. They were rarities when I started. That's been a huge change in healthcare. Respiratory started out moving tanks of oxygen around the hospital, so you had to be fairly strong to do it. It doesn't need that anymore, and those kinds of differences that make it more a male workforce. Respiratory therapists were men, and nurses were women, and that was kind of the way it was. Very few female doctors. They're all men. Back into the 80s, and then somewhere toward the late 80s, we started to see more and more women into all the healthcare workforce, not just nursing.
So we're looking at differences in genders in terms of the profession. Obviously, technology has been a huge boon, makes some things maybe a little bit more efficient. I know EHR people always say, like, is it making it easier, making it worse for us? But like, overall, technology is definitely streamlining certain stuff. What have been, as you're not even looking back over 40 years, but just even maybe the last few years, what are some of the biggest frustrations that you've had with the current healthcare system as it's set up compared to maybe not even 40 years ago, but maybe even just 20 years ago?
So the biggest thing that I see of is, and it's not my former employer or any of that kind of stuff. Is just in general,
Yeah.
we have refused to compete on price. And we refuse to modernize things to where we're giving a product out and a service out that people can afford. Health care inflation has been staggering. It is incredibly expensive. We just got Medicare. I can say, it's still paying $600-700 a month for, my Medicare because I had to pay a premium because of of my previous salary. My wife is paying $1,100 a month, because she's slightly younger than me, and doesn't qualify for Medicare. And those kinds of prices, not that many people can afford. And so we really need to figure out a way to streamline this, our industry, and make it to where it's affordable to most people and much more convenient. Right now, I think it makes insurance companies a lot of money. It makes
It does?
big
What?
big pharmaceutical companies a lot of money, but it doesn't necessarily deliver high quality healthcare. And I define the high quality healthcare as healthcare outcomes. We should be focused on the outcomes that people care about, and kind of get rid of all the noise. And
If we're not focused on the outcomes as much, what would you say we tend to be more focused on then? And I don't, obviously, when I say we're not talking about providers and doctors. We're just talking about like the institutions and the system as it is.
We're trying to figure. It's just like my last job was running a primary care clinic, and we had just finished up with COVID. We were kind of feeling our way out of the pandemic, and then I can remember the day the Ozempic commercials started. And all of a sudden have double or triple the message volume, and everybody desperately wanting this pill to get thinner. And I just think like that's not the right focus for the healthcare system. And at the time we're paying over $1,000 a month for a patient to be on Ozempic or Wegovy or whatever. And is that really a good use of the healthcare dollars? I don't think so.
What about so your last job was in a primary care physician. I just want to jump into the hospital system for a second, and because it's still, I think it's been one of the biggest frustrations with doctors, but I feel as if there's more noise kind of percolating of the fact that doctors can't own a hospital, but a private equity firm can. So, when we're talking about maybe some systemic changes over the last few decades in healthcare, for those, some people obviously in it, they're like, all right, I know what happens when private equity typically comes in, but when we're looking at just, maybe profit over patient, what does that look like in an actual hospital setting to you?
I feel like, because I worked at Kaiser Permanente, I was fairly insulated from that. We didn't do things strictly for money. We got paid on basically on a membership basis, and so we tried to take care of people efficiently and at the lowest possible level. That's where we're going to make our money, is keeping people out of the hospital. Where I saw the differences to some of the private places that I worked with, then that's about exactly how many patients you can see, how many billable hours you can have, where it wasn't so much that was one of the great things about Kaiser Permanente. We weren't always focused on that, but I kind of felt like some of that was falling off. We had to do things and become more like the whole other part of the industry, if you will, because that's what people wanted. People wanted a very cheap insurance on a monthly basis, but if they got sick, then they have a super high deductible or a super high, what they call it, MOOP, minimum amount of expense that they had to meet, and then they're like shocked that their copayments and they really didn't have much coverage because they hardly ever met their MOOP, so they were spending a lot of money on that, but they got a cheap monthly benefit thing, like that would kind of cover them against catastrophic things. But
I'm kind of wondering with that, like as things kind of change over time, the thing that I always thought was really interesting or good was you know, managing doctors essentially, right? And we recently did an episode of how, you know, doctors of yesteryear compared to what's coming out of med school today is very, very different.
oh yes,
So tell us a little bit about that, about, you know, managing doctors from like, you know, from, you know, a couple decades ago to today, and what are some of those differences that you're seeing, and whether or not it makes your job or the healthcare system easier or sometimes a little harder.
yeah, just in my tenure you know, managing doctors, and when I say managing doctors, like, you know, I ran the schedules and you know, figured out where they were and kind of answered to leadership about, you know, things like access and those kinds of things. So that's knowing where your doctors are and making sure that they're actually, you know, working, you know, efficiently. And because we weren't a fee for service place, and the joke was that, you know, Kaiser doctors are always in a meeting, not seeing patients. You know, whereas if you're in the private world, you may be out going to, you know, 4 or 5 different hospitals in the course of one day, and then you know, go to your clinic at night because you want to make all that money. Yeah, so yeah, so very definitely. Doctors of the previous generation almost never called in sick. I mean, it was
They
like
just worked.
they just worked until they dropped, you know, and you know, that was very much them. They were doing 50, 60 hours a week, and you know, that was kind of the norm. But you know, maybe you know, a kind of a dovetail into that. You know, hey, now we have more women in there. Now we have doctors who call in sick. You know, quite a bit, and it is fairly disruptive. People get upset by that, and that is a different. But you know, I think doctors also deserve a high quality of life. You know, I think what we were doing, you know, 20 years ago wasn't particularly healthy.
How so?
Oh, I just think that people just it was kind of like you were grinding. And, you know,
It feels
people
like it feels like everybody, you know, like from back then. It's just like just the safety precautions, just the red tape. Like a lot of these things just didn't exist, and you just went pedal to the metal pretty consistently.
like that. Oh, yeah, there was a lot of different kinds of, you know, respiratory therapists were great at coming up and building pieces of equipment. Now, I think, you know, people recognize that, you know, a lot of times that wasn't safe. And you know,
We shouldn't do that.
spectacular accidents I, you know, have witnessed because somebody, you know, tried to cobble together a piece of equipment. Now everything's FDA approved and so forth. But people used to do all kinds of things like that. You know, everybody had their own little way of doing things, and they were very idiosyncratic. You know.
So people back in the day, it felt like they worked harder. They were willing and able to put in more hours, more of a grinding mindset. And then now it's just they call out probably way more.
Way more,
like
yeah.
way more, and it's disruptive to healthcare just in general. Yeah. So in kind of leading that, one of the things that you mentioned in a previous conversation was that inspiration often comes from places outside of usual leadership books. So what were some unexpected sources that shaped your leadership style?
So yeah, I kind of always detested the meeting where you would show up with, you know, the senior leader would show up with a book they just read, and they would buy everybody in the meeting a copy of this book, and then you would always have to kind of refer back to it you know, whenever you were reporting out, you know, you were, you know, that Disney book, you know, the Finding the Who's Moved My Cheese book, you know, all these different kinds of books. So I always like to go look at usually something in world history, usually something, I like art, I like music. So, you know, I tend to get examples from that, or I like looking at other industries, you know, like what's going on in retail. You know, I remember I worked my way through college, you know, at a Sears store, there's no Sears store now. What do you have now? You have Amazon.
Yeah.
So what was the transition there? How did, the world's largest retailer just die like that? And that's because somebody came up with a better business model. Amazon is a better business model than, Sears, and is much more convenient and much more user friendly. And nobody goes to Sears anymore.
So it's like jumping from one river stream to another one, just to look at opportunities to be more innovative. So when you're staying the course of just everything medical, in a way, you're saying that it could kind of function as its own bubble, and getting out of that and like read a book on world history, read a book on the Roman civilization,
Right.
get into that, get into art, and find the golden nuggets in that could be applied to your industry.
Yeah, so I look at art and music as, people talk about creativity and make a lot of things about creativity. But so where do you find more creative people? But they're in the arts, and their brains work differently. And how can you bring that to your practice? I've always thought that was the best way. How can we come up with different ideas? Do we have to always do the same thing? Yes.
So talking about innovation, actually, I want to go backwards just for a second, because you made a good point, and I want to unpack it a little bit. You talked about 2 minutes ago about doctors taking more time off now compared to the past. So it's almost like a catch-22, because on one hand you mentioned it's disruptive, which I want to pick that up a little bit, just like what you see as as the disruption it creates, but then also understanding that, hey, maybe the old way we did it wasn't also the healthiest. Like you said, a lot of people work themselves to the grave, or they have no family life, or just no life in general. Yeah. So I'm curious to know, A, what's the disruption that you see, and then B, what are maybe some solutions? Maybe it's innovative solution, but what are some solutions that we can undertake? Because I do see that fight between younger doctors and experienced doctors is like, this is the way we just used to do it. And it's like, I don't want to do that anymore. I want a life. I want a family. I want to enjoy myself. Like,
yeah. You have to really look at it from the patient's point of view. I think we should start out with from the patient's point of view. I've got an appointment that I made with my primary care doctor 3 months ago. I'm all set and ready to go. And then maybe a couple of days, or maybe even the day of, they get a phone call. Dr. So-and-so is out of the office, and they don't really even get an explanation of that, because we're kind of leery of telling them, hey, your doctor was sick, or hey, what have you. That feels terrible for the patient. That's very frustrating, and it's very disruptive to their care. So you do need, especially in things like primary care, and a reasonable attendance, a little bit better attendance than we have. And I think we have to structure our clinics and structure our work in a way where they're not doing the same thing every day. So I ended my career in a primary care clinic. They were, most of the doctors were there seeing 12 patients a half day, and day in, day out. So maybe it would be nice to, have a little break from them. Maybe, they want to go and see some, the newborn clinic, or maybe they want to do a lump and bump clinic, or maybe they want to get out and, do a little urgent care to get them some variety. Because if you're sitting there, for 30 years seeing 12, 13 patients a day,
you go straight crazy.
You go stir crazy with it, and that's a chop business, and it's all the same business too. I think it's most you're taking care of people's diabetes or blood pressure, and it's mostly the same stuff over and over again.
For somebody in leadership, how would you recommend they have that kind of conversation? Because, what you're saying makes a ton of sense to me, because that's the conversation I would have with providers all the time, which is when you're out, it affects, obviously, the patients. And then if you're not canceling the patient's appointment, as some clinics don't want to do, because like you said, it's patient care. They say, come in. Then you have other providers who are maybe now double booked or triple booked, and you're putting some stress on them. How would you say to a leader in healthcare, here's how you have a conversation when you're focusing on it's important to take care of the patients, but also important to take care of yourself as the employee and the doctor.
Yeah, it's just that we have to do it in a way that we're not gypping the patient out of their appointment. I think it's important to have conversations with doctors and treat them like they're actual people, as opposed to like that. The joke for me was there's, primary care doctors and especially pediatricians. Well, they're sort of almost like normal people, medical subspecialists up to the point where you get to cardiologists and pulmonologists. They're basically like demigods, and by the time you're the surgeons, then they are definitely gods. And then cardiac surgeons or neurosurgeons, it could be absolutely prima donnas. They're kind of the rock stars of healthcare, but they also I know a few cardiac surgeons, and a lot of the cardiac surgeons I know, they're on their second and third marriages and stuff like that. They just love being in the operating suite. They love doing that work, but they're not there for their family. So I think we just have to, for those people, we have to kind of let them decant a little bit. And for the people in primary care, we have to do things to change up their routine. Some of it, working from home and doing, telemedicine visits it's very nice for them, to break things up. They don't have to come into work. And
how important is that like more, more like, well, I'll just say like healthcare locations, that you have a leader that can identify like, hey man, this person's getting burnt out, or like, hey, this person is, going through the ringer in this place or in this way. And you're able to identify that and then basically make recommendations of like, hey, maybe we should jump into this or pull away from here, or just, let them kind of eat that humble pie, eat that issue that they're going through, because they're going to learn that lesson through themselves. I don't know if that makes any sense
well, I mean, a lot of times we are watching doctors fall apart, and there's not a lot we can do about it because we're on the same little treadmill that they are, and I had 30 doctors, and if somebody calls in sick, somebody's got to see their patients and the patients that they already had scheduled. And like that, I think we have to build things in so that there's a little bit of rest. We were starting to do some of that. Like, for example, I put in a nurse practitioner into our nurse clinic. Just for the reason because our nurse clinic, so the people would come in, and if they were sick enough, the doctor had to break away from their routine and come down and see the patient. But so you put a nurse practitioner down there, then they didn't have to do that, or they didn't have to add a same day to their schedule or something like that. So we figured out things that the pebbles in their shoe, the things that really irritated them. And try to fix those. Then there's the telemedicine thing where that they were not coming into work. Maybe there was whole days or half days that they could be at home and take care of patients that way. So that would help break things up for them. And then some of them is alternative clinics that they could be involved in, or projects that they could be involved in. So but it's kind of a grind no matter how you look at it.
But
we're really trying to focus on fixing that.
You did describe some good stuff. I mean, overall, those are systems that are built out to give them some rest, or even if it's still working. To your point, it's all right. Maybe it's the mental load, maybe it's not the physical load, or we're looking at it's still 50 hours, but not every hour is the same depending upon what you're doing. And then you also mentioned something that I believe a lot of offices really missed the boat on, which is just utilizing support staff. So hey, I got a nurse practitioner for my doctor, or you see some organizations saying, why would I want to spend maybe 125 grand on a nurse practitioner, but then it's all right. How much are you really impacting and losing by your doctor having to call out because they're fried? Maybe they have a mental day, or it's like I'm sick, right? So it's they lose. I mean, I think Antonio, I think it's some numbers or some some along that lines, but it's like we losing like billions of dollars a year based on in the U.S. for people calling out sick, and it's like, all right, what if you just had maybe a support staff for that person, or for maybe a physical therapist, you can hire an athletic trainer, right? So it's not always like the biggest investment, but sometimes like, all right, what's the long-term effect of just giving them something, like a release valve?
And one thing you mentioned too a little bit earlier was, describing some doctors like, okay, these are almost like regular people, and these ones are the demigods, and these ones are the prima donnas, and these ones are God's gift, right? Exactly. And there's a couple things you mentioned before. This is like before we got on camera, where two things. One that you said like, and I've known you since I was like, what, 4 years old?
Yeah.
About 4. So I read some stuff where I'm like, I know exactly where you're coming from, where you said something interesting where fellowship matters more than leadership. And I kind of took that.
Followership. Yeah.
Followership, excuse me. Followership matters as much as leadership. And I want to segue into one thing is that, every experienced leader eventually realizes that not everyone on the team should actually be there. So that leadership, followership, how do you deal with truly difficult or toxic employees that are maybe not on that bandwagon with you? They're not following in the way that they should.
Well, I think that is one of the most important things that I did as a healthcare leader was to try and remove toxic people from my teams. So any time we started noticing that person was always getting in arguments wherever we put them, and
like, damn it, Steve, no matter what I do,
no matter where you are, they would invariably say, oh, I just don't get along with the people in this module, move me to the next module. And and sometimes that worked. Moving something like that, they didn't fit in that, but then they fit fine with the other group of people. But oftentimes, they didn't fit any better when they moved to across the hall to the different team. It was still the same issues. Once you start noticing the pattern of it, they're always having a problem. And nobody wants to work with them, then you need to start moving them out the door.
Is that difficult in some states or in some organizations where like it is, a verbal warning and then it's a write-up, and where deep down you might want to be like, I just want to fire this fucking guy today. And so what's that kind of fine balance that you've had to maybe kind of maneuver with that, where it's like, I really just do not see this person working in any way and I know it, but I have to go through these hoops, if you will.
Okay, so like say Kaiser Permanente 20 years ago, there were things
fist fights in the
well, I mean, let's talk about the fist fights. Because there were the fist fight in the cafeteria. Your employee and somebody else, the other employee, they don't get along and they got in a fight, right? So, so 20 years ago, a fist fight would be, they're out the door, both of them. Right. And it would be pretty much we would fire
automatic
same day.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. So, as opposed to now, if I considered that they might be somehow dangerous, I would put them out on a paid leave. And while the lawyers talk about it for months, functionally they're out of the department. Probably that's the same decision. I mean, I can't have people having a fist fight in the cafeteria or whatever. The HR situation, the legal situation has become so crazy, especially like in a state like California, where it's difficult to fire.
Yeah.
Just really quick on that. So the state, the organization, the times, and where does kind of staff shortages fall into that? Where let's just say 20 years ago versus the staff shortages that are kind of kind of dominating.
I've never worked in a time in healthcare where we had what we thought was enough people ever. So I do understand that, and you know, my wife's a registered nurse, and it's like they like to talk about patient ratios and so forth, and it is difficult to quantify, but we've never felt like we've ever had enough people to do the work that we do.
So from like 2025 to like 2005, 1995, that throughout that whole time frame, you're like, we've just never felt that way, that we are like, cool, we're loaded up with staff, we're good.
Yeah, I've never had that experience. that is a unicorn. I mean, there's always some people calling in sick, some people on leave. The second you get fully staffed, there something would happen to where that.
But is that a thing today? I mean,
Oh yeah,
it's
absolutely.
where it's like, all right, you know, there was a fist fight, this happened, there was sexual harassment or something occurred, and they're like, hey, let's not let him go. Like, we kind of need them.
Well,
Can't replace this person very
okay,
quickly.
so you mentioned sexual harassment, so you know that.
We're not experts in that.
Well, I'm not. We're not experts in sexual harassment. The only thing I had to do with this sexual harassment thing was I had to report it.
Mhm.
And there was a special person that wasn't me, would come and investigate it, and usually months would go by, and then they would give me a finding, and then I would be able to act on the finding, whatever it was, you know. Because they kind of took the investigatory part out of the hands of the frontline managers in order to protect themselves, because those laws are absolutely crazy.
So that, I mean, that, Dan, I would imagine like that's frustrating. Where like, let's just say, you know, there was a legitimate sexual harassment claim, and it's awkward, and like months are going by, and there's no resolution, and what that does to the office or culture.
Yeah, no, they're convinced that you're not paying any attention to them, and that nothing's going to happen. And then one day, months later, I will get what was the phrase? It was the conduct has been substantiated.
So ridiculous. I mean, and you know, and that's the thing though. Even I've never, thank God, I've never been involved in that kind of situation. But to your point though, you know, you have an employee who's just not even a good fit, right? They're just, like you said, they're disruptive. They're a pain in the ass. I've had those employees, and then to your point about HR, I'm like, we've written them up. Can I just fire them? Like they're clearly not a good fit. It's like, well, we gotta do this. We gotta do that. I'm like, so essentially, we have to keep somebody who's ruining the environment, and preferably that bad apple in the bunch, right? And then creating, kind of permeating the culture, where everybody knows the person, whatever you want to call it, toxic or just they're an a-hole, whatever, however you want to classify them. Now every employee is saying, we're keeping this person. So everything you told me, maybe during orientation or these weekly meetings where family and it's a great culture, it's all bull crap, because you're not getting rid of this person, right? And I know they don't always know the backstory. So to your point, it's like, well, if we get rid of the doctor, now we're extremely shorthanded. But this is also an area where leaders could be more transparent to employees. Like, this is what we're trying to do. You know, I think there's a place for that, right? Like, this is the process. This is why we're not able to maybe let this person go or let employees go right away. It's a tough situation, like you said. Then it just puts the leadership in a position like, I'd love to get rid of this person, but I'm kind of hamstrung a little bit.
Yeah, and legally, I can't really tell them what's going on with them. You know, it's until the investigation is substantiated. Once it's substantiated, and I decide what the action is, then another group of lawyers have to decide if that's something that we could do. So, like most of the time for severe sexual harassment, the decision will be to terminate somebody. But I still had at the end it wasn't. I had to be reviewed by legal, and that all takes time, because I mean, if we do get a wrongful lawsuit, it could be multi-million dollars worth of claims, and we couldn't go there. We would get back to the employees who made the original complaint and say something truly unsatisfying, like, we have found that the allegations were substantiated and we are taking appropriate action. What is it? No, can't tell
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, that's
Yeah, that is so, that doesn't feel like justice to, people.
It doesn't. I mean, just generally speaking, yeah, like it feels like things are swept under the rug, and there's no clarity, there's no accountability. Communication is airtight, where I don't know what's going on, and I would imagine just it impacts productivity and performance of that person.
Yeah, and you'll notice that the
BA of yeah,
the people are like really uncomfortable around that person. Occasionally we would move them. Rarely we would take them out and suspend them. If we really thought it was something severe. But in general, you're very selective about suspending somebody, because these suspensions are all with pay. So you're going to be paying somebody to do nothing while they're waiting. It just depends on how severe the conduct was,
right.
Or the alleged conduct.
What, as I said, what's your and whether or not you guys did this or not, but I'm just maybe more curious about your thoughts about those, maybe I'll say higher level professionals, but maybe some of those doctors or just executives even that interact with the staff a lot that are disruptive. What's your thoughts on them getting individualized outside coaching? Maybe some leadership coaching. Is that something you guys did, or just
that? Yeah, there was a care experience team that would teach doctors how to, we called it charm school.
Charm school.
Yeah.
Charm school. But that, it was that was kind of a joke. But in terms of how to really talk to patients, how to become more compassionate, less to the point, control their feelings and occasional anger and that kind of stuff. But I mean, when you're talking about staff performance, it was a bail of paper to get somebody fired usually, and then by the time you're talking about a physician, it was usually something that was, we weighed in pounds before, you could let a physician go with a few exceptions.
I like to pivot over to operations, because that was kind of your bread and butter, and that's kind of the title too. I love the leadership side of things. And operationally, there's a lot of overlap with that, because those are the windows that you're looking at within the organization to make sure that the leadership is running smoothly. But one of the things that you emphasized before was building a team of experts rather than doing everything yourself. So what does that transition look like from operator to leading operators?
So for me, I had a person who was very good at nursing practice, to look at all things nursing, because that's a separate little specialty. And although I've been in healthcare and had some idea about it, you really do need a subject matter expert in that. I had another person who just love the schedule. There's something about if you have a 30 doctor schedule, making sure that they have a nurse, and making sure it's a nurse that they like working with, and all that kind of stuff. This is the person that just focused on that. Another person was focusing on facilities, making sure that our facilities were safe and clean, and so forth. And then we had enough cross-pollination where somebody could take a vacation, and maybe the person who was good at scheduling would help with the ordering and the facilities work. But they organically knew, if a senior leader called up and said, hey, we're looking at this, they organically knew the first 2 or 3 steps to take, and they're certainly empowered to take them.
How much of that is from the direction of leadership and coaching them of like, this is what we do? Because it's like almost like a line kitchen. We're like, all right, this person leaves, you step in here, you do that. How much of it is that? And then just common sense from the employees, just naturally knowing like what to do?
Yeah, some of them were, had started like at the reception desk.
They just worked their way up.
They worked their way to where they were like booking appointments and fixing problems on schedules, and then to where they ended up being a staff coordinator. So there is definitely that kind of longevity, at the clinics that I worked at, that everybody had a long tenure at Kaiser by the time they got into the little bubble of the team that kind of ran the building. Yeah. But I do look at it as a mark of success, that every place that I have worked at Kaiser Permanente, my assistant took over for me when I left. So when I was at Kaiser West LA, my assistants took over for me. So that to me is the validation. They didn't run out and just they could have run out and got a different manager and so forth, but they did not do that. They liked that. And the primary care clinic is run by my former assistant. And what I shared with her is that she needs to be building people who can take over for her when she decides to move to Vegas and and run away. Yeah.
So you've worked with, so you mentioned like you worked with large institutions like Kaiser, to like really, really small ones, and I would imagine probably Kodiak, Alaska is probably one of the smallest ones.
Yeah.
Yeah. So where we met, there's a town of 4,000 people. What operational lessons transfer between the large ones and the smaller ones, and what absolutely does not scale?
Well, yeah, I think the paperwork, all the different kinds of things that you end up having to do, is all there, and you are just much more of a jack of all trades at a rural hospital. You have to know a little bit about a lot of different things in order to survive. Whereas you go up to something like, a Kaiser Permanente, and we had 6,000, 7,000 people in the main campus on Sunset. There were definitely people that knew everything, could dive deep into safety, could dive deep into, how to disinfect and clean and so forth. Where, I had to know a little bit about it like that. But the volume of stuff that I would have would be smaller, but the job never lessens.
What are when we're looking at being able to, and you said it pretty nicely, which is just being in healthcare, there's a lot of chaos on a consistent basis, right? There's not like too many long periods of time where you're like, wow, everything's really nice and calm and copacetic. There's usually something going on. So from a standpoint of being able to manage, like really control and manage the present while still having a focus on growth and the long-term aspects of practice, what would you recommend to somebody, maybe somebody a little bit younger, if it's, Wayne, I'm trying to grow the organization here, but I'm just so swamped with day-to-day stuff. It's just constantly putting out fires, and I don't have any time to plan for the future. What's worked for you, and what are maybe some systems that they can utilize?
So what we were talking about before, where I had a group of specialists and things like that, that was designed so I didn't have to think about every little moving piece of things. If I couldn't think, 5 years down the line, or what's going to be due in 6 months, or what next year which changes. If I couldn't do that, then I'm consigned to having the same day over and over again. It would become a continual crisis. So I've always strived to make things a little bit better every day, and I never really shot for perfect. Even if it was close to perfect, there would always be something that would come up that I would have to attend with. But just to have that peace of mind of people that could handle a regular day. And then later on, you could step up for a crisis or have a moment to think about, next year or 5 years from now, and be moving your team towards that goal.
Yeah, that's funny that you're saying all that, because I'm just picturing my past, kind of very similar situation, and I'm looking at a company CEO, super innovative. The guy's a freaking genius. But But I'm just saying, I'm like, man, I got a lot of good ideas and I can't come up with crap. And then simultaneously, though, I'm thinking to myself, man, I'm just interrupted all day long. And, you're young, you're egotistical. It's just on one hand, you start out saying, all right, everybody needs me, so important. But then it's, all right, shit, I can't get anything done. I don't have any time to think about the future. I can't plan for anything because it's just doing things all day that I don't really need to do. And appreciate what you say, because that was, I think, the biggest shift for me was I got to train some, maybe not managers, but just people who can manage certain departments that it's just not me all the time. So, and I think you're bringing up a good point of just even cognitive load, right? The ability to just let your brain kind of calm down and actually think of shit.
I would always think of, what's the trick for today? And, and the trick was always, what do I need to have in place so, whatever goal that I was thinking about a few years from now was going to be possible. So how could I do that for that day? And if I achieved my trick, then I called it a day and went home.
I want to, if you can unpack something for me, because I've dealt with clients before where they're in a similar situation where they're a CEO, they need to start building out their team a little bit better, maybe let go of a manager that is a little incompetent, or like they're maybe a overpaid front desk person and you're paying them like a GM, like you shouldn't do that. And part of that is identifying talent. And so kind of walk us through because I feel like, especially with your psychology background, that you're able to sit down across from someone and sniff them out pretty quickly. And I don't know,
with notable exceptions.
Yeah, yes. But just that, like I've had clients where like they're trying to build out their team so that they can achieve what you're talking about, and they're just hiring duds. They're bringing on like the wrong person, and there's little things that they're just missing. So did you have to kind of go through a season of like of that, or did you feel like you kind of hit the mark pretty well in identifying the talent that's surrounding you?
Well, I think that there is a little bit of luck involved with it. So some people. So like when I got my job in primary care, the previous manager had identified somebody who's really ended up being a very, very good nurse that I worked with and became that kind of a great assistant. At other times, when I was when I was thinking about my respiratory days, I found somebody, and I was sitting across from this meeting, and I was just going, I need you to work with me, and
Help me help you.
like this, and that. So, however it happens, but you have to be honest with yourself. When I first got that person in primary care, I didn't know her, so it was kind of like I was afraid because I had such good luck with my previous assistant because I chose her.
Mm-hmm.
And there was this strong loyalty. Am I going to have a strong loyalty with this person? Because you end up, you're like you're in the same foxhole with this person, and they've got to be committed to you, and you have to be committed to them. And it's
what does that mean? Because I think it can sound or look different from industry to industry, of having an assistant or an employee that's loyal to you. How does that look like in kind of big healthcare systems, small? What does that kind of mean to you? The importance of having loyalty, and compare that with someone that's disloyal.
Well, with the disloyal person, you're always like looking. They're always trying to make you look bad. So usually that's anybody who's trying to make you look bad to,
Like the board or
board or whatever. That is going to be the disloyal person that you have to deal with, because the disloyal person is always looking at, they don't think you should be their boss. They should be the boss, and usually there'll be some sort of ways that they're showing you, aha, see, look, I told you, look at this. Here's another example.
Told you, Wayne.
I
should be running it.
I should be running it. I would never have chosen that person or what have you. Whereas the loyal person will be like, even if Wayne made a mistake, and here's how we're going to fix it, and we're fixing it together. So there was some comfort level there. Obviously, there's some limits to that, but we were always had each other's backs in terms of supporting each other in front of a senior leader or something like that. This is
I want to talk a little bit about decision making, especially as it relates to maybe some long-term strategies. But when we're looking at implementing new products or new ideas, it tends to be, I think most people are obviously very resistant to change, but you do see that. I believe it's a little bit more prevalent in healthcare. This aspect of, especially nowadays, we're seeing big push for AI. Then you have some people like they want to rush all in, but then there's other people. It's just, whoa, like how does this work? So this aspect of almost creativity versus implementation. I'm just curious to know how you kind of balance out in a healthcare setting, coming up with ideas, being innovative, especially nowadays with just things moving so fast. It's like, how do you maintain our current 2026 model of being progressive and advancing versus, all right, I want to make sure, the stop gaps and it works and it doesn't disrupt our workflow.
Well, let's start with that's the big gorilla in the room is the AI. So if you really wanted to do something about AI, you needed to have done it about 5 years ago. That cat is out of the bag, and it is moving. So I'm just guessing because I think I just saw the beginnings of it, what it could do, and so forth. But I can definitely envision, say, like a big organization like Kaiser Permanente has a giant call centers and stuff like that. I could see those going away like that.
Probably in a year.
Well, if they're that, they have a labor unions and things to work through and stuff like that. But I mean, that's going to happen. You're going to have to make some of those kinds of changes, whether or not you want to or not. And I tend to think it'll be better over a period, but there'll be a lot of disruption, especially in those kind of clerical jobs or even middle management jobs, because you could probably figure out an AI that could do all the operational needs, and there really wouldn't be a need for much of a middle management or much of a administrative staff. So, my job, might not exist in 10 years or so forth. So you have to look at it from that point of view. So how can you really, given that reality, make your way? And most AIs, from what I understand, work by they search through the internet and they see what everybody else has done. So you have to come up with ideas that haven't been tried a million times before, because so you're going to have to be creative. So the last in-service I gave to our group was about creativity and the difference between creativity and innovation and stuff like that, or and implementation. We were very, very, very good little implementers, but not so good as far as being creative.
Can you kind of break that a little bit of the creative, innovative, and implementation?
So creativity is coming up with a completely new idea. So a lot of times when you're working in a larger organization, senior leadership will come up with a strategy, and you will execute on that strategy. So you're implementing that vision. Now, you can get a little bit creative implementing the vision. It's different ways of doing things, but you're really not coming up with something brand new in general. And sometimes they don't even let you be creative. They just say, this is how we want you to do it, and this is
there's no wiggle room.
There's no wiggle room or whatever, and so you can't be creative. So I always tried to look for little places where people weren't watching. Just to be honest, little things I could try out and see if they work, and
then share it.
and then share it after I knew it was going to work. And then if it didn't work, then I could decide to stop doing it.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, those are the kind of little ways that you can be creative, and I think that that's very important. But I do think creativity is kind of always been a terrifying thing to most senior leaders, because that is really messy, and you don't know what's going to happen, and we always look at the artists like Vincent van Gogh cut off his ear and did so we have to really understand creativity, and when we can do it. Another place that you can be creative is especially in large organizations, is there's a lot of zombie initiatives. Something that's people were working on 5 years ago that they hardwired into the system, but that person who was working on that has long since left the organization or moved on to higher like that, and left their system, but it's not really functioning anymore. People are just doing it over and over again because they were told to. Now, occasionally you can take what they were doing and use it for something completely different. That hey, that wasn't, you weren't supposed to use that for that. And that's a creative thought, or it also can allow you that space, because if they're not watching it, really, does it really matter? And if it's not, I'm not saying that you would stop doing something that was a regulatory requirement. If you're in the hospital, it was a joint commission requirement. You have to keep those things up. But I'm just talking about some stuff that the big bosses came up with, and then the big bosses left or got promoted or wherever, and they stopped paying attention to. If they stop paying attention to it, that's an opportunity.
What would you, tiny shift, but what would you like to see now that you have maybe a little bit of a bigger worldview? You're at it now. You're at it. You're retired. You're kind of like relax. Maybe see things from a little bit more of a 30,000 view. What would you like to see positively happen in healthcare over the next few years?
So I would love to see AI evolve into something where we're delivering in a cost-effective manner healthcare at, say, like 50% less for a premium than we are now. And I think we have an electronic medical record. I don't see people digging into the electronic medical record and going, hey, we have this drug, we've been giving it to our patients. It doesn't seem to be changing the outcome one iota. So could we get rid of it? And I think if we were faster about learning what does and doesn't add value to the healthcare system, then we could have a boon where we could see 50% of the cost disappear, because I think that we tend to do things like Fiddler on the Roof. It's like tradition, we're trained in a certain way, and it's got to be that way, but is it really? So I think we have powerful tools that we could do data mining, and then we could really adopt, some cost-effective ways to like that. And I'll also figure out that there's probably going to be some expensive things that really are worth it, and definitely fund those. But we have to get the cost of healthcare down. We have to compete on price, which is terrifying to the current status.
Yeah.
Well, I think if you could figure out a system where it's going to be less, then everybody's going to flock to it. So the second somebody does it, then it'll be a game changer. It'll be like Sears Roebuck versus Amazon.
Right.
And we have to look at how could we do that and make it more convenient to like that. That would be the only thing that would probably get me to go back into it. And it would be an opportunity to do that, but I don't have that kind of money. And
Well, just to kind of continue on that thought, like, so what you're saying is like, if there's opportunities to advance technology, it's for the reason of reducing down price, but maintaining quality outcomes. What are the costs of poor technology in healthcare? Like what, if that makes sense, like what are the consequences of that, of not getting up to speed?
Well, I don't know if it's the cost of technology. It's really how we're using the technology. So people have to decide that that's the goal that they want to go through. And if you are in the insurance industry or you're in big pharma, you have no interest in reducing these costs. But I think there should be another element into the system where somebody just as powerful can say, "Well, that new drug doesn't really do anything," or "I've got a cheaper one that that works better," and not buy the more expensive one, because we really do need to make sure that we're utilizing our healthcare resources effectively. And if a $10 a day diabetes medicine is effective as a $100 a day one, then we of course should use the $10 a day one.
Wrapping up here,
Yeah.
just speaking to the future leaders, if somebody wants to be maybe in your position or something similar to, what would you say maybe, for they want to be successful over the next 5-10 years? What are the top 2 things that they should start doing immediately?
Top 2 things that they should start doing immediately. Okay, so really, you need to immerse yourself in the system, because I know a lot of different managers and things came out of some sort of healthcare profession, and I think it's really important to have somebody with a clinical background, especially when you're talking to doctors. So you make sure that you're able to take care of patients, make sure you're a good follower first, and that you're able to work with a team, and then gradually move yourself up, and you'll get to a point where you end up stopping, because that's it becomes more and more political as you get farther and farther up. So not everybody has that kind of political acumen to do that. So I mean, my boss at Kaiser Permanente was very, very political. Really, there's no need to know anything clinical at that point. Because everything becomes with politics and stuff like that. So they need to develop those things. The second thing is kind of like what we're doing now, communication. If you can't communicate, it doesn't really matter. So you need to present. That's probably where I fouled up myself in my career. I'm not the best public speaker or whatever, but like one-on-one, I'm pretty good. But I think if you're leading big teams, you've got to be able to hold a room and present, and it has to be exciting. So those are the 2 things: learn the craft, learn the business you're in, and communicate. And then you will attract all these other people that will want to work with you and will make you look good. And when it's time for you to go, you make sure that one of those people takes over for you. And I think that is what you do. The proudest things that I have, I can say that I've people that I just took a chance on. I'm thinking of this one, like summer intern I got. And she's now a chief of operations up at one of the Bay Area hospitals or whatever. It's just like, but I know for a fact that if I hadn't taken her in for the summer intern job, and we worked on some business plans together, she would be nowhere. She would never have made it. So you got to take chances on people and work with them. And that's a really, truly a gratifying thing, especially as you advance in your career. Your only real legacy is going to be the people that you worked with and mentored over a period of time. And that's all there is. I don't miss the work, but I miss the people.
I love that. So make sure that you immerse yourself into the system that you're in, communicate, and definitely take a chance on people. Don't give up on people, because you never know where they're going to go, the impact that they leave on you, and then also the impact they can leave on others. I
Well,
love that.
if you don't like people, don't get into healthcare. I said,
Duly noted, yeah.
I have run into doctors and nurses and stuff like that. They climbed the mountain, they got to the thing. There would be a profession, but if you don't like people, you're going to be a lousy doctor. You're going to be a lousy nurse. You have to love people to be in our business.
I like that. Wayne, thank you so much for jumping on. We learned a lot. I feel like we need to have like a part 2 to this. There's actually so much that we didn't cover, but thanks for coming in and dropping all this knowledge and
Yes,
all these gems.
for sure. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Yeah.
Yeah.